Hello, hello. Good morning, everyone. We are live and ready to start with some really cool stuff. So I'm just gonna prepare the chat here, just to make sure we can cover everyone's questions. Right. Cool. I'm gonna share my screen and I'm gonna walk you through what we are going to do today because it's a pretty exciting part of the process. So let me just see. Here we go. Alrighty. So here is the prop that we've been working on. Hang on, I just need to log in into my stream app. Hang on. Sorry, guys. I keep forgetting my passwords. So I have to try a couple. Other one. There we go. All right. So now I have the Restream chat. That's the platform basically that we're using, so I can see everyone's comments from YouTube, or if you're watching this on Facebook and all of that, it'll be in there. All right, cool. Alrighty, so let me just give you a quick rundown in case you were not here for previous sessions. So this is something that we started in Modeler 2 sessions ago. So everything is done from scratch. Everything is non-destructive. In the last session, we kind of like fixed the design a little bit and we adjusted some of the, I would call it the details, even though this is not detail or doesn't have any high frequency details, but it is detail or it has smaller pieces, right? But everything is non-destructive. I can at any point, this is kind of like going over what I mentioned last time, but I can double click any object, access these pieces, and that's it. We now have something completely different. Well, not completely different, but different enough, right? So the point of this and what I wanted to show with this kind of like series is that 3D Modeler allows you to work non-destructively and create these concepts really, really quickly without really um, any time to worry about the topology or any technicality. It's just very simple, very intuitive. And once you have something that works or that visually the design in terms of the design works, then you can move on to the next part, right? One of the biggest things that I've seen people kind of like criticize is the fact that the topology is quote unquote not good. And that it is a comment from, or like this type of comments are from what I would call newbies, someone that has not a lot of experience. Because when you say that a topology is not good or is good, you need to contextualize what that is. So, in the context of a concept, right, which is exactly what Substance 3D Modeler is, a concepting tool, the topology that it produces, it is great for concepting. Obviously, it could be improved, it could be adjusted, and all of that. But when people say this is not a good topology, you need to understand that they have a very narrow, well, let's call it a narrow understanding of the process, or their context is very different. So for instance, someone in the game industry that has done mobile games and video games might have a lot of experience, 15 years of experience in mobile or whatever the case might be, but that is their context. So obviously a topology from 3D Modeler, they will go and say this is not a good topology. So I guess my point here is that a good topology is something that works for the context of what you're creating. So this is not for video games, this is not for visual effects or any of that. It is for concepting. Having said that, though, you can totally create something that works really, really well. Also, just wanted to check, guys, if you can hear me all right, because I might switch to a different mic. Let me do a quick test, a very short survey with you guys. We'll come back to this in a second. Just because I got a different mic, I want to see what your opinion is very quickly. So right now I'm speaking to a microphone called the MK600 or MKE600. So it's meant to be a really good one. It's a shotgun mic that's coming here from the top, but it might sound a little bit roomy. So I'm gonna switch now to a different one just to check if this is something that works a bit better. Sorry, the other way around. I've been switching on and off. So this is the mic that I'm speaking right now. This is the same mic, and this is the one that is the shotgun mic. So let me know. I'm gonna just use one for the rest of the stream. Just wanted to check. All right. So let's just keep it simple. Anyway, I just wanted to test out those things. Is this substance 3D model for AI? No, no, this is for concepting. So what I was saying before is that even though with that comment about whether this is a good topology or not topology, again, it is a great topology for the context of what we're doing. However, you can create topology that is more easy to work with. So you can create like fewer triangles, or you can create even quads. And it's similar to the zero measure process in ZBrush. So I wanted to show you that, and this is what we're gonna be doing this stream. So I'm gonna take that and I'm gonna send it to Painter. And this is already in 3D Painter, is exactly the same asset. And I just noticed there's something wrong here. I need to check this. Oh, I know what it is. Because I exported it. I exported a couple of things that, yeah, I exported some UVs that I shouldn't. That's all right. We'll fix that later. But basically, this is the same object. And if I enable my wireframe, this is what I mean. It's not bad. It is, again, for the context of what we're doing, it's pretty decent. And, you know, it has quads everywhere. It has this really, let's say, complex geometry. You know, if you were to create this for a game asset, this will have to be a lot, with a fewer polygons, obviously, and a lot more optimized. But again, I'm not creating this as a game asset yet. I'm just doing it as a concept. Then if I want to texture it, all I need to do is retopologize it and do it again. But this is a nice topology, and the best part of it is that it's 100% automated, right? So this, what you see here, is exactly what I got from 3D Modeler, and it works just great. So let me just show you how I got to this point, because I'm sure this is what you guys are here for. So I'm gonna go ahead and do a, let's do a new one. I'm gonna open a sample. Let's go for matte discard. All right, so I'm just gonna create it. I'm gonna drag and drop it here and do a new one again. But I'm gonna show you how you do that. So step one is to take your object here, go to the export tab, and now you have these options to export it. So you can select all the pieces, or you can group them together, and then you can just export it for substance. Now, more specifically, you can select everything like this. So you just click and drag, and then you click on export selected scene or scene selection, and here you define what the preset would be. So Blender, Stager, Painter, all, Unreal Engine. So I'm gonna leave it as Blender. I'm gonna set this format to be FBX. You can also change it to USD, which is pretty good. I'm gonna go for FBX, keep it simple. The topology, and this is where you can change things. You can switch from the polygon type to quads or triangles. So I'm gonna select quads. The polygon count, this is where you determine how much resolution you're gonna end up in your low res mesh. So a target polygon count of 60 is pretty decent. You can go lower than that. The lower you go, because at the end of the day, this is an automated thing, it will have harder time adapting to the smaller details. So a polygon count of 60,000 is a pretty decent one for what we're doing. Again, just always think about the context of what we're doing. We're not creating a super optimized asset for video games. This is a concept. Then the adaptive topology deals with the smaller versus the larger parts of the model. So anything that is a smaller detail, it would adaptively create smaller polygons in there to describe more detail. And in larger areas that don't need that much details, it will create larger polygons. That's it. So this is the the issue that I had on the other one. So you can generate UVs again. In for the context of what we're doing, UVs generated automatically here would be great. We might have to fix some of the seams later on, but it will unwrap things for us. We don't have to worry about that technical part either. So you just generate UVs. You can generate UV tiles. This is to work with the UDIM workflow. I'm gonna leave it just by itself, just so that you can see what the deal is. So just generate UVs, no UV tiles. That allows you obviously to have more resolution, but we're gonna keep it simple. And that's it. I'm gonna leave everything else as default. And I'm gonna click on export. And let's set this. Where's my live stream? I'm gonna call this one grenade test and underscore or low. Okay, so this would be our low poly mesh. So this is the one that has UVs, the one that has the retopology or like the cleaner topology, and that's it. Then we don't have to do anything else. I just want to double check because I might have to re-export it. I don't know if I selected the metal bit, or maybe it's, oh no, it is selected. Yeah, cool. It's just a little bit crazy, this view, because it's using all the previews of the booleans that we use and all the non-destructives. All right, let me see the chat, and I can answer any questions you guys have right now while we export this. And then we're gonna get into texturing. So the MK600, sorry, this is just for the question that I asked before. So the MK600 is better, that microphone? Let's try it again just to see if that works. All right, so this is the MK600. So in theory, if I move this out of the way, you could still hear me all right? Is that better? It's just that this one, when I hear it on my headphones, it feels a lot more roomy, but I can just get it closer, I guess. Let me know if this sounds better to you guys. I'll go with this. This is what I'm trying to fix, like improve on the quality of the audio. I did improve on the video quality, which I think is great compared to what I had before. So now I'm trying to do the same thing with the audio. Cool. So now this is exported. Now we have a asset that we can work with, as in a low poly. But obviously, all of these nice bevels and all the details, or like the sharpness of the details, is a lot better. So Eddie's saying that the previous mic is better. So this is what I'm trying to decide. Okay, so I'm gonna switch back to the one that I have right in front of me now, just because it sounds less roomy. So let's do that again. All right, so this is the other mic. Sorry about that, guys. I guess we're just testing things out. So in order to get all of these details from the high-res mesh, we need to export this as a high-res mesh. So to do that, I'm gonna do the same thing I did before. Select everything, click on export scene, go to the same settings. The only thing that I'm gonna change is in the topology. So I don't wanna do a retopology. I wanna change the quads to raw mesh. So the raw mesh is gonna give me exactly the resolution that I set up in 3D Modeler. Now, one thing that you can do, I'm gonna cancel this before I do this. One thing that you can do is that you can increase the resolution before you export. So let's say if you select this bit, you can right click and then you can export, increase the resolution, right? So we can click on that. And you see now it is a lot crisper. So this one, for example, you see a little bit of the jagged edges. Again, you can right click and increase that resolution here. And it's non-destructive, so you can add as much as you want. Add more resolution there. And I think the rest of them, let me just do a quick check. Everything else is like super clean and crisp. Yeah, everything else is working pretty nice. So basically, this is the last step that I would do before I export the raw mesh that has all the topology, okay? So let's make sure that everything is selected. Export scene, and I'm just gonna leave the raw mesh. And let's go ahead and export that. And I'm gonna call it exactly the same. So grenade test, but underscore high. All right, and let me just see the questions again. Have you ever used PXYZ to convert step files CAD data to Geo? The Geo that comes out is horrible to work with, but wondering if you have any tips. I'm not familiar with that. Is that a software to retopologize? I've never heard of that one, to be honest. I rarely work with CAD models, but it really depends on what you're doing. I'm gonna show you the topology that this thing produced as a raw mesh. Again, it's kind of like it's a voxel modeling app, really. So what you get as the raw file is a Dynamesh model, essentially. So it works in the same way as you would in ZBrush. So let me just bring that up, because the idea is that in order to move into 3D Painter, the idea is that you have a high-res mesh and a low poly mesh. So let's I'm gonna import the file, the raw file. Here we go. All right. So as you can see, it's a pretty clean model, because ultimately, if I select, let's say, this bit right here and go into polyframe, it just has the Dynamesh quality, right? That's what we got as a raw file from 3D Modeler. And now that we're here in ZBrush, we could just use the retopology tools in ZBrush. The only difference is that you'll have to do them, or yeah, you'll have to do the retopology for every single object that you have. But it can be done. And if you're happy with the retopology tools in ZBrush, then by all means. For me, it works exactly the same, because I work for concepting and creating something that is visually, let's say, impactful and appealing. So I don't worry about these technicalities, as long as the end result is good. So just to give you a quick example of how this works. So I have this asset. I'm going to enable symmetry. Right now we have symmetry in the x-axis, as you can see the two instances of that brush. And I'm going to hold Control and click here on the undo history. That basically saves a point in time. And I'm going to select the series measure. I'm going to set a polygon count of maybe 1,000 polygons. Click on series measure. Then ZBrush is going to go through the process to remesh this and generate quads based on the volume that I currently have selected using the symmetry. Once we have the final result, which is pretty decent, right? I'm just gonna go ahead and subdivide this a few times, let's say 5 times, and now we have a total of 1 million polygons. And because I saved a state in the undo history, I'm gonna go ahead and project history without color. And now if I turn off my polyframe, you'll see I'm gonna also do a polish. We have a pretty clean mesh, and for hard surface, this would be a great tool, right? And we have subdivision levels, so I can go back into the lowest subdivision level, and you have a pretty decent topology, right? So this would be the same thing for every single object or every single group of these asset, right? I will just go through the process of retopologizing things in ZBrush and projecting details, and then you end up with a high res and a low res mesh. That is if you want to do this in an external project. However, if we go back into Modeler, this is what the software does automatically. It just generates the topology of the entire object very quickly, and then you have your low-res mesh. So just to show you what that looks like, I'm going to go ahead and import the low-res mesh data that we got. And you'll see it is pretty decent. I'm also going to merge everything together just so that you can see the topology all together. But it came based on the groups that you created. So merge visible, and I enable polyframe, and I'm going to do an auto group as well. Okay, so this is pretty decent, right? This is kind of like the same idea of running the series measure tool inside ZBrush, but this is an automated process. So this is the low-res mesh. This is what 3D Modeler created automatically with one single click for all the assets. And like I said, it's very, very decent topology for what we're doing. Like even these areas, obviously it could be improved if you look kind of like inside what we have here, but this is not a something that will prevent us from work and create a high quality image, because when we project the details, all of these things will be adjusted. So now that we have both, we have the low-res mesh with UVs. Remember, this has UVs. Again, the UVs might not be the greatest one. It could be optimized. I'm gonna show you what they look like. And they overlapping because I merged. Maybe I should have done that. let me do this by itself. All right, so this is one set of UVs. Again, it's not the greatest UV. It could definitely be improved and optimized, but we can use triplanar projection to avoid any cut seams, that sort of thing. So I'm not too worried about this. This is, again, part of a process that the idea is to produce things quickly and generate a good looking image that then, if it gets approved, or if we want to recreate it for a specific outcome, let's say video game or visual effects or whatever, then we'll do the retopology in a proper way, and then we just project the details, project the texture, all of that good stuff. All right, so now let's go back into Modeler just before we jump back into Painter, because I want to show you something else that you can do. Within Modeler, you have the Export tab, and then you have these kind of like steps that guide you through how you want to do it or how you should do it. So I just show you the simplest one, that you just select everything and export the entire scene or the entire selection of the scene. However, you can do things a little bit different. You can export sections and parts and have like different groups. And that is very easy as well if you want to have different material groups, for example, that sort of thing. I automatically have different groups purely because I selected pieces and I assigned different materials. So they'll have different material IDs. Now, if I click, let's say, the handle, and the handle is kind of like part of the same group of the grenade body, let's call it, you'll see that now I have this option to define this asset. So I can click on define asset, and now I have this as a group. So I can just go ahead and call this one body and handle. And then I can set where I want to export this. And then I can go ahead and do the same thing with these bits. And let's select these ones as well. And let's click on group and define asset. So now we have a different group. So this will be, I don't know, metal bits. And then the rest, maybe, yeah, this is the rest. And I think this one as well. Okay, and group and define asset, let's call this one the rest. Okay, so that's it, right? Now we have these 3D asset or 3 assets, and you can export them in different ways. And this is a great tool to essentially have more control over the amount of polygons or the quality or the settings of each individual piece of your object. So for example, the body, if I select that, I can just set this to be, all right, I want to have a retopology of quads, but I want more points. And then in the metal bits, these are going to be smaller pieces. I want to be, have quads and reduce that topology. And the same thing with the, the rest. Maybe this is going to be raw mesh for whatever reason, right? So when you go ahead and select all of these and export them individually, then you'll have assets with, let's say, different qualities, different retopologies as well. So just something to keep in mind that is very, very powerful. All right. Any questions, guys? I can cover anything before we go into Painter. And while I check the chat, or while you put the questions in the chat, I'm just going to go ahead and drag and drop the new asset. And I think I made a mistake as well. let me test something out. So I think, yeah, we have, oh no, we have multiple assets. Great, that's all good. Okay, so I just wanted to check. So as you can see, we essentially have the orange plastic, the metal, the green plastic, and the black plastic. All of those, I can go into solo mode. All of those are the groups that I created based on the material. So that's great. So if I go back into Modeler, let's go to the model itself and open up the material tab. These are the 4 materials that I created for the model. So everything is grouped by the material ID once I got it into Painter. So each one of these is going to be its own separate texture set, or in other words, each one of these will have its own resolution independent from each other. So that's pretty good. Okay, so you see this is nice, and I can enable wireframe. I like to see it a bit better, something like this. All right, so the wireframe is not too bad. like I said, this is what I showed you before in ZBrush. But in order to recreate or recover some of the details that we had in the raw mesh, we need to import the high-res mesh and project the details into Painter. So to do that, I'm gonna go into the texture set settings. I'm gonna click on Bake Mesh Maps. Those are super important when it comes to Painter. I'm gonna go ahead and click on this one to reference my high-res mesh. That high-res mesh is going to be the grenade, um, the raw mesh. So let's just do that. Is that the raw mesh? Yep. By default, grenade test height. Yep, cool. So by default, this is working fine. Let me see. Oh yeah. But there is a new tool in Painter that allows you to adjust the cache even better, because you can start moving this like so, right? And try to achieve like a better projection. But now there is this thing called automatic or experimental. This is like an auto cache tool. So if you do that, it should already wrap that cache a lot better for the individual pieces. So it's based on their volumes. And that should give you a much cleaner bakes. That's it. So we now have that high-res mesh that we are referencing to apply or project the details into the low-res mesh that has the UVs and the nice topology. That's it. We don't need to worry about any of these things, really, just because the reason we are having this as different groups is because, the reason we selected this automatic experimental is because we have different groups, so it's gonna be a lot easier to project details. Other than that, I'm gonna set the output to 4K so that all the maps that are created are going to be at 4K, and I'm gonna create everything. One extra thing that I like to use, especially just for visualization processes or being able to see things better in the viewport and later on export it if I need to, is the bend normals. So I'm gonna click bend normals for everything. Make sure the bend normals is enabled. That's it. Let's go ahead and click on Bake selected mesh maps, and Painter is gonna go through that process. All right, some questions coming through. I think I would take it to Maya and do the manual retopologies. Yeah, absolutely. You can do Topogon, Retopoflow in Blender. You can do anything that feels comfortable for retopology. I don't like to, let's say, waste time on that unless it's going to be a production ready asset, and then that's the requirement. But because what we're doing, and that was the original, let's say, premise of this series, is to conceptualize using 3D and be quick about it and create really cool stuff in non-destructive workflow, there's no need to really worry about that. But let's go ahead and return to painting mode now. Let's turn off the wireframe, and we have some very clean mesh maps. And just so that I can visualize the bend normals, I'm gonna go to the shading settings, and oh, it's already enabled. Yeah, pretty good. So you see the bend normal is mostly a preview thing, but it really helps to. It's kind of like a better. It's different than the ambient occlusion. I always struggle to explain what the bend normal is. The bend normal is kind of like telling the software where are the areas of the model that are occluded, but mainly because they are away from the source of light. So it's not an occlusion, it's not an ambient occlusion, but you'll see if I turn this off, all of these areas that should be, let's say, occluded, even though it's not an ambient occlusion, by the light, are displayed in a better way, right? So this is purely a visualization thing, so that it just works better. All right. The other thing I like to do is I'm gonna reduce my field of view here, the camera, so that it's a bit flatter. If you wanna go for like full, maybe that's a little bit too much, a full orthographic, you can just go here to the camera, so to this little icon next to the camera and click on orthographic view. I don't think we need that. Let's go for perspective and just reduce the field of view. And that's pretty much it. We can now go to properties, and we can have, you see we have all the mesh maps, and we have the layers. And we can go ahead and start with the texturing process. All right, let me see the chat really quickly. So Artist Future, are you going to make a course in Substance 3D Modeler? Probably not. I mean, I could do like some tutorials, and that would be that. This is basically what we're doing here, but probably not a full-on course because it's like a standalone app just for a single specific thing. So not many people would really benefit from a course. I think I can just cover what you need to know in terms of the tools and how to approach Modeler in a few tutorials. But there is a course coming up very soon that is for Substance Painter. So anything that you need to know about texturing. I'll cover that in a bit if you want to hear more information about that. So Jaco Rodriguez is asking from in LinkedIn about the mesh map. No, that's something that we created straight from Modeler. So this is what this whole series has been about. You can go back to the previous two episodes, let's call it, of this and how I created this in Modeler. The mesh maps is created sorry, not the mesh maps. The mesh is created automatically when I export this into Painter. Pablo, has Substance changed because now it separates everything and the ID map is no longer necessary? That the last thing I worked out in a character, I saw that it respected the ZBrush layers. That makes sense. No, it hasn't changed. Well, I mean, it hasn't changed in relation to how it handles those things. But yeah, it's a very specific question. I'm not entirely sure what you mean because yeah, the ID maps are still super necessary if you want to have control over masking and things like that. All right, let's go ahead and jump into texturing. The first thing I like to do is kind of like block out my colors. So I'm gonna select this bit and I'm gonna create a fill layer. That fill layer is going to have a sort of greenish desaturated tone, similar to what we have in Modeler. So this is blocking out the palette really. So that's the first thing I like to do. I like to set up a base layer. Let's call it base. I'm gonna set the metallic and the roughness as well. Just as it's a little bit more like a plastic rough or like a plastic painted, and there might be some metal underneath, obviously. And let's go ahead and select the next one. Another fill layer, same thing. Base layer or base. Metal and rough, those are the main things. This is gonna be a dark gray. Again, like another type of plastic. Yeah, we can deal with that later. Maybe something a bit darker. All right, and then this bit is the orange one, or the orange plastic. Let's make this orange. We can, this is, in terms of the concept of non-destructive, this is exactly the same thing as what we dealt with in 3D Modeler, as in we can come back and just click on this and change the colors and change everything at any point. All right, and finally we have this, which is going to be a metal surface. So same thing, base layer or base, and this is gonna be metallic rough. I'm gonna make it full metallic, and I'm gonna make it a bit rougher. And the color, let's just keep it as a light gray. All right, so I think we have pretty much everything ready to go. I'm gonna double check with this. So we have the black plastic, we have the green, we have the metal, and we have the orange. Perfect. All right, so now in terms of what we had in Modeler, we are at the same stage, right? So I'm gonna close this now. This currently changes, right? So we have now basically what we have in Modeler, we have now in Painter, and now the whole process is about how to texture and how to approach the texturing of the software. I'm gonna remove the camera just a second so that you can see, oops, the other way around. There we go. So you can see here at the bottom, we have all the mesh maps ready to go. And the mesh maps in 3D Painter are super important because those are the ones that are telling the software how to interpret the 3D model. So that's why they call maps, because they gave a map to, or they gives a map to the 3D software to understand the 3D model. So anything that is a mesh map is going to tell, for example, the software where is the top area of this piece, right? So very briefly, this is a very important thing in case you haven't used Painter before. So let's go for world space normal, or position. Position might be an easier one to explain this. There we go. So you see this has like a nice gradient from this green on the top left to the bottom right that has this sort of purple thing. That is being given by a single map, but in the 3D space, it looks like a nice gradient that tells the software where things are positioned. So that helps us when we create um, any any generator that deals with position, right, or where the light is coming from and that sort of thing, because the software doesn't really care much about the 3D object. It just needs to know where things are located. So if I bring in the 2D map, this is how it looks for this specific mesh. Let me go into solo mode. So this mesh right here, this is how it looks, right? So this is a mesh map that is generated when we created those big maps. That's why it is very important to do that first. So that's like the first thing we need to do. And now we can use those mesh maps to generate anything that we want. So very briefly, I'm not gonna do the whole process, but I do want to show you, share with you the general workflow that you can use for Painter. So let's create another layer for the green bit, and this is gonna be a metal. You can actually search for metal. Let's see what we have here. I have downloaded a few things. Not sure if I'm gonna find something that is gonna work for this, but if I don't find anything, we can just go to the Substance 3D assets and type metal. So this is, if you have Substance 3D Painter, you should have access to the assets. This is a free, like, massive library. There's like thousands of these materials, and then you can use them in your projects. So these are parametric materials, so SBASR, I think. Now I forgot. And that allows you to change things on the fly. So maybe let's try this galvanized metal. So I'm gonna download it. I think I already own that one, or I already have it here. So the little tick box or check lets you know that it is part of your library. So it is called metal galvanized. So there we go. Here it is. So I can just drag and drop it in here. Let's remove that one. We don't need it. So that is a nice metal, but I'm gonna go ahead and change a few things just because. Where did I see it? Here. You'll see that weird line. So this one right here. So you see that weird line? That is because this is ultimately a generated process, right? So automated. So the software, in this case, 3D Modeler, use that mesh to, or like use the algorithm to generate a UV that is ideal based on, whatever input we have. But it created these cuts that might not be great for the texturing process that we're doing. It's not a big deal, just something to keep in mind, that if you want to have more control, or if you want to do things manually, if you want to do a UV map that has that looks a little bit better for the texturing process, you can do this manually. And let's say this line that is being cut through here, you can just do it maybe along the seam, or hide the seams a little bit better. So all of this is just to say that you can tweak this, but be careful, be aware that when you use this method, the UVs might have these cuts. This is actually a very good trick. Let me just show you, not a trick, but something important. You can go, if you want to check, if you want to check the UVs of this, what you can do is you can create a new layer. You can create a black mask, and then you can do a generator, and you can just go for UV border, or this one right here, UV random color, or this one right here. So anything of this. I'm going to use this one just to show you like the UV border. And I'm going to use a red color. Right. So this is a mask, or a generator using a mask that essentially creates a black and white mask, and whatever is white is going to create these seams right here. Alternatively, you can use this random color. But yeah, probably the best one is just this one, just to see. And if you want to just check the general look of the UVs, you can use the checker, right? This is probably better if you just use it on a paint layer so that it doesn't, hang on, let me fix that for you. There we go. So instead of using it as a mask, you can just put it directly into the fill layer. So this is probably better if you want to just understand how the UVs work, right? So like I said, it is automated. If you were to look at this in a production context, you can say, yeah, this is not a good UV, because it is not it is not ideal for that context. But because this is a concept, we can deal with this and we can work with this very easily. So all you have to do really is use triplanar projection instead of UVs. And that is a very simple thing to do. So again, I don't want to deal with this for too long. So I'm going to click on the metal thing, and here in the projection, I'm going to switch this to triplanar. So that fixes immediately those things. And this is great for this type of materials that are kind of like generic noise surface, if you will. If you have something that has very specific lines, let's say like the grooves of a wooden material, when you use triplanar, when you get to the edges of that cube projection, things are going to fade into. So if you have like horizontal and vertical shapes, it might not look great. I'm going to give you an example of that. Again, there's always ways to deal with this, but let's go with wood. I'm going to use this one just so that you can see. This is purely to give you an example of when this triplanar projection might not be ideal. All right, so if I set this to triplanar, here we go. So you see from the top, looks pretty good, right? We have those wooden planks, and from the left, we also have this. But the problem is that where the projection sort of meets in terms of the cube, so this corner right here, that doesn't look as good. And we can play with the hardness of it and then sort of like fade things a little bit. So if you're happy with this, of how this connects, great. But when you have something that has more roundness to it, like this is going to look awful. Even if you sort of like fade things like that, because it's just going to fade into the wrong line. So just need to be aware of those things. So yeah, I just wanted to show you the kind of like the pros and cons of what we're doing. There's definitely ways of, approaching this to get it working better. But if you want a cleaner UV layout, then you have to do that probably manually. Anyway, the point is that we don't have to for the things that we're going to do with this asset. So now we have the metal, and we have, sorry, this is the metal. We have this set to triplanar projection. And I'm going to use the tiling to increase the resolution a bit. I think this is a little bit too strong. This is not the metal that I want, actually. Sorry. Let's find a better metal. I think I already have some, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that. So let's go for metal. You know what? Let's create a metal. So this is going to give you a better understanding of the process anyway. I'm going to create a fill layer, and I'm just going to make it metallic, fully metallic. And the roughness of it is going to be, not as rough, maybe a little bit less than that. All right, so this is just a metallic, very clean metal. The best thing, and this is one of the coolest things you can do when you're setting up base layers and surfaces for these type of assets, is to create an effect for finish the metal. So basically you can go to the filters here, and you can type metal. Sorry, let's do effects, filter by effects, and scroll down, and here we go. So just the matte finish. So this one allows you to create a material finish for that simple layer. So I like the metal rough, but we can use grinded one, or grainy, or galvanized. We can even use this brushed one. I'm gonna go for the rough one and drag and drop it in there. And now, just by doing that, the metal finish, we have something that is a lot more interesting. And obviously we can play around with the scale of the grunge. We can play with the bump intensity and a bunch of other stuff. So I'm going to reduce the roughness a bit more and add a bit of a darker color. All right, so this is kind of like the first pass. We set up the finish of the base layer for the metal. Okay, so just to repeat the process, it's a fill layer and we're using a matte finish. That's all. Okay, of course we can improve this a bit more. So maybe we can make the metal a bit, grungy, a bit more, add kind of like wear and tear to the actual metal. So I'm gonna do another layer, and this layer is gonna have metal and rough as well, and it's gonna be metallic, and it's gonna be a bit rougher and a bit darker. Okay, so before, after. Now with this one, we can go for a grunge. So I'm gonna type just grunge and find something that that has a good set of values, so a good range of values. So a lot of white, a lot of black, and somewhere in between as well. So maybe this one right here, grunge map 015. So all of this comes with Painter as well. And I'm gonna drag and drop it into the section here for, or the little square for the mask. That creates a mask, and just so that we can visualize it, I'm gonna press the Alt key and click on the mask. So this is what we are getting. Also, I'm gonna set this to triplanar. Sorry, not planar, triplanar. There we go. And we're gonna play with the tiling a little bit more. We can also bring in the manipulator here, this gizmo, and that allows you to position this a bit better. So basically what I'm trying to create is, you'll notice that this map has more of the white bits towards the bottom. So I'm gonna try to push that like so. So there's more information of this layer towards the bottom. So anything that is white is going to come through. Anything that is black is gonna be basically be hidden by the map, by the mask that we're doing. So, okay, now we have this, and it's kind of like hard to see. So what I'll do, just so that you can see things clearly, I'm gonna make this very, very obvious. So the red color is what we can see from the new mask, or the new map, sorry, the new layer. I always get confused with all this stuff, but anyway, this is a layer. If I wanna increase the, let's say, the sharpness of these details, we can open up the grunge map. We can push the balance and push the contrast within that map, and you see how that adds a lot of contrast. And if this is not enough for you, you can stack different layers and different effects to the mask itself. So in the magic one, you can click on levels, and this is like in Photoshop, you have these levels. In fact, if you know Photoshop, you know Painter. This is something that I did last week, actually. So we have a video on my YouTube channel that it's basically this. Is just, if you know Photoshop, you already know Painter in a way, because the concepts are very similar. So go ahead and check that out, because this creates a comparison that is very familiar. If let's say you know Photoshop, but you want to get into Painter, things like this, right? Like the levels. This is exactly what Photoshop does. So just to show you, if I go into the mask itself, I have the levels, and I can just use those levels to contrast that. But obviously, we can see it in real time, so why not? All right. Any questions about all of these guys? I don't know if I missed anything on the chat. Cool. All right, so now that we have this, what I'll do is I'm gonna go back to the color. We don't wanna have any color here, or any hue. I'm gonna make it darker. And that's it. So this is very subtle, but when it comes to texturing, as I always say, it's all about the subtleties. So before, after. So it is using a simple grunge map to add a bit of that sort of wear and tear. All right. So maybe this metal also needs to have a bit of a bumpiness, or like some sort of surface variation in terms of height. So I'm gonna do this very quickly as well. I'm gonna create a fill layer. Again, metal and rough is gonna be full metallic. This time is gonna be less rough. Oh, let's go for something similar. We can change all of that. And I'm gonna go for something that has this type of grunge. So grunge pebble spots. Let's see if that works. Drag and drop into the mask itself. And I'm also going to increase the color to something that has a lot of contrast, just so that we can see it. Triplanar projection, and play with the tiling. All right, so you can see some of those pebbles coming through. So I'm gonna increase the contrast a bit more. I think we need more than this. So we'll probably need a different map. And this is the great thing about the non-destructive workflow, because we have this setup. I can just go back and change maybe these grunge spots, drag and drop it in here, and it automatically changes. We obviously have to set it to triplanar and add a bit more of this. All right, so balance is gonna add more of those. All right, so that is not too bad. Let's go ahead and set this back to where we had before in terms of the color. And this time I'm gonna add the hide map. So, or not the hide map, the hide channel. So I'm gonna enable that and push that forward a bit. So again, super subtle, maybe even more than that, just so that you can see it. Again, this is a lot, right? And I always say it's about the subtleties. So this is very intense. So one thing we can do is in the mask itself, we can variate how this map looks. Instead of going through like different maps, which you can totally do, you can variate what you currently have. So let's try both. Let's try both approaches. I'm gonna go for noise. Let's try this pearly noise. Drop it in there. So that's probably closer to what I need. Let's try the white noise flat. This one is a little bit smaller. All right, so I think this is better. This is what I was kind of like trying to get. So you see, it's very easy. But what I was saying before is you can take this and let's say add a filter. You can add something like blur. So you have a little bit of blur, so it's not the sharpest details. Very subtle stuff. Okay, so before, after. And another thing I want to do is maybe reduce or remove the roughness altogether and the metal so that it reduces the metal and the roughness values of any layer that is underneath that. So this is only providing some additional height, which I still think that is pretty high. So one thing that you can do is you can target the specific channel that you want. So in the layer stack, you can click on height, and then we can reduce the intensity, just like a opacity channel. So I'm gonna keep it very subtle. There we go. So it's just adding a tiny bit more of visual interest. All right, so now we have, let's say, our metal. We can keep working on this, but this is a good starting point. So I'm gonna select all of the layers that make up my metal, Control G to group them, and I'm gonna call this metallic or metal. That's it. So this is the essence of the workflow with Painter. We have a base that this could be like our plastic. We can work on that plastic in just a bit. We have the metal, and then you just go ahead and combine those two materials together. So for the base layer, we can create a more interesting plastic as well. Something I like to do is duplicate. So I'm going to show you some really cool techniques as well. So I'll duplicate this, and I'll change the hue and the saturation slightly, very subtle, like so. Create a black mask, and we're gonna use a grunge map, and then we'll use some generators. So let's type grunge, and maybe something like this. This grunge map 13 might be a good one. Drag and drop that in there, and play with the balance. Again, triplanar, change the tiling, play with the balance, play with the contrast. And that's it. So this is a super simple thing to do. Is a duplicate of the same layer with a grunge, and you'll see, hopefully you can see that in the video, but there's some very subtle variations in terms of color, right? But I can also variate the roughness. So I can add a bit more reflection there. So it's a single layer that is providing me with, or is giving me all of these additional details. I think the roughness should be okay, the way that we have it. So super subtle thing. I haven't changed much. Now let's do something that you know, a lot of you probably have seen or have used before. If you're new to Painter, this is going to be really, really cool, which are the generators. And because we have the mesh maps, any generator that we create will use those mesh maps, and we can control things like crevices and where the rust would be or things like that. So I'm gonna duplicate the base layer again, drop it here at the top, and this one could be just, you know, a dirtier version of that plastic. Maybe like something like this, like more decolorated and probably rougher. So the dirtier the surface, the rougher it would be. And let's go ahead and click on black mask. And in the magic one, I'm going to click on generator. And in here, I'm going to choose something like dirt. So by clicking on this, you'll see we now have dirt everywhere. And this is pretty cool, but we can definitely adjust it. So the point I was trying to make before with the mesh maps and the importance of those mesh maps is that when you use generators, and let me actually move this just so that you can see a bit more of this, you'll see you have these input maps. So we have the curvature, we have the ambient occlusion, the world space normal, and the position. So this generator is creating dirt based on those maps. So if you don't have any mesh maps, you can still use the generator, but it's not going to show you, it's not going to give you anything. So if I remove this, you'll see now we don't have any crevice in here. If I remove the ambient occlusion, now that mesh map is not working either. So the generator will work, but you don't have those mesh maps. So they're very, very important for that reason. Okay, so now, and let me just do something just so you can see what I'm doing a bit better. Cool. So I can go ahead and enter the mask by pressing the Alt key and clicking on the mask. And I can also play with the contrast of this generator. I can play with the dirt level. So how much dirt is being, let's say, accumulated in those areas. So I think this is pretty good. And then I can play with the grunge amount. So the grunge amount is kind of like an image that is being automatically added with this generator around here. So I can play with the amount of grunge. So if I reduce it all together, it's going to be a very clean black and white image. But I do like the grunge because it provides that sort of like more natural and organic distribution. So let's go with something like this for now. And I'll show you something else. So we now have that dirt coming through, but we're going to exaggerate it so that you can see it, and then we knock it down a bit. So from the stack of layers or stack of effects that we created for the mask, we can add some levels just to add some contrast. And that way you can see a bit better what that gray map is doing and in which areas is doing it. So before, after. But again, to vary it and to make sure that it's not like, too manufactured, this effect, we want to make it a bit more organic and something that looks more natural. We can combine what we have, which currently is this white mask. Let's also go into solo mode. With some of the grunge maps and other generators if we want to. So let's use this map. Let's drag and drop it here on the top of this layer stack, and let's set it to triplanar. Play with the tiling just a bit. And we can use maps within the layer stack or within the effect stack that we have for the mask and blend them together the same like in Photoshop. So again, if you have a look at that tutorial that I created, it's called If You Know Photoshop, You Know Substance 3D Painter. It's already in YouTube. You'll see I make these comparisons of how to create a material in Photoshop and now in Painter. But you have these blending modes, the same thing that you have in Photoshop. So for example, if I set this to multiply, I'm basically letting through all the I'm kind of like I'm multiplying this map on top of what we had before, right? So only certain parts that are white in the grunge map are coming through, right? So this is the same thing that we would have in Photoshop. So this is using the dirt generator to position or to place this mask in the areas that make sense to have this type of dirt. And then we're using this grunge map to essentially adjust this a little bit. And you can go, increase the balance, increase the contrast of that grunge map. You can also have control over the opacity and all of that good stuff. And that creates a much more interesting map. So this is just the generator, which is pretty good, right? But if we add a little bit of customization to it, it looks more intentional and a little bit better. All right, so now that we have that, I can click on this layer. And what I'll do is I'm going to make it a bit darker. Again, it's non-destructive, so we can change this at any point. All right, so not too bad. And finally, you want to add something that adds a bit of greasiness to it. Like if you think about this as a grenade, something that you hold in your hand, the grease of your hand will create those smudges of grease and that sort of thing. So I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to make it pure red just so that you can see it. This is kind of like a workflow that I use with my students as well in the Extra Mile, and this is something that I teach as well in the upcoming course of Substance 3D Painter. I tend to just push things to the limit or have like very saturated things, very bright things, so that I can visualize the effect that I create, and then I obviously reduce that and change it. And because it's non-destructive, it's a very simple thing to do. So I'm gonna do that very quickly. So let's find smudges, maybe. Smudge. So there is this wipe. Maybe this one right here. So you see, it's kind of like wiped. We also have like fingerprints, but I think this one would work better in this case. Drag and drop this into the mask. And I'm going to set this to triplanar. And then I'm going to increase the balance and the contrast so that I can really see what this is doing. So you see we have some wipes there. Let's decrease this. and I'm gonna use the projection tool just to move it around, find something a bit better. All right, and then we can reduce that balance and the contrast. And so you see, this is kind of like overriding the color because we are using color. But ideally, we just want to concentrate on the roughness. Because the grease, let's say if it is just like grease from your hands and you're holding this grenade, or you're wiping it with a tissue or something, you're not changing the color necessarily. You're just changing how the surface has more or less roughness, or the reflectivity in a way. So just adding like a layer of more reflective material like grease. So I'm not going to change the color. So all I'm going to do is turn off the color and turn on the roughness, and then I'm going to push the roughness forward a bit. So let's increase the contrast as well. All right, so hopefully you can see there's a tiny bit of like this grease coming through. I'm going to push it again so you can see it. I think I'm using the opposite. So I'm going to invert this map. All right, there we go. No, actually, that was correct. This is why I have always like the color on so that I can really see it. But I think this works. So it's not reflective everywhere, just in certain areas, which is good. And that's pretty much it. So we have this base. Maybe the color is a little bit too pale. So because it is non-destructive, I can go ahead and select my base, change the color and all of that. However, here is a really cool trick that you can also use. Since I have a couple of layers that have similar color, if I change one, let's just go with purple color, it's going to be very tedious to go back through all the layer stack and adjust the colors again, even if it's non-destructive. So instead of doing that, what I'll do is I'm going to convert this into a group. This is going to be my plastic. And you can use an effect to the entire folder. So I'm going to click on Add Filter, and I'm going to type HSL Perceptive. Click on that one. This is the same thing in Photoshop as the hue, saturation, and lightness. So I can basically change that through the entire layer stack. So let's go ahead and add a bit more saturation, make it darker, and go for something more like that. All right, so more like a military green type of color. And that is making, the rest of the effects that we have in this material a lot more visible. All right, so far so good. We've just created a simple plastic material and a simple metal material as well. And what we need to do now is combine them. What I'm going to do with the metal is actually, I'm going to reduce the roughness a bit more on the base and some of the layers. And this is what I love about this whole thing. It's just very easy to adjust just on the fly. And now that we have two clear different materials, we can play around with mask to combine these entire folders. So in terms of the steps, when you're going to create something like this, is I like to visualize it in this way. I like to set up my colors first as the blockout of the palette. Then I create individual folders for the materials that I'm going to use, and then I mix those materials together. So you can do that with the way that I showed you, just creating your own custom materials, or you can download materials as well, or SBSAR materials, and then just combine them the same. The only reason I like to build my own materials, other than just because it is fun and I like it, is because it allows me to have full control over the things that I want. So I know how to set up things, and I know that I can come back and tweak things. In fact, one thing that I can give you as a little trick as well is, if you build this material, let's say this metal material, you know that from these three layers, the only one that is deal with hide information, in my case, is the third one. You can, of course, name things properly, but I prefer to have more of a visual reference. So I can right-click and set it as a red color. And for me, red in the context of what we're doing here on Painter, it always reminds me of layers that deal with anything that has hide information. So when I open this material, later on, if I want to reuse it, I will open up the folder. I know that, okay, this layer is red, so it must have some hide information. I can come here and I can toggle this on or off, and that allows me to change things. So this is one of the reasons I like to build my own materials, because when I have my own library, even if there are simple materials like this, I can bring them in, I can add more to it, I can save it as a new version of the material, and then I every time that I do a project, I end up with a library of assets. All right, so let me see, is there any question? Any case? Antimatter grenade. Yeah, it's kind of like I don't know. It's something that is like a sci-fi grenade, but it's something that I thought maybe firefighters could use. So it could just create like foam to dissipate the fire or something. It can also be used a bit of a mini extinguisher, hand extinguisher. So it has like both options. That's the idea with the design. All right, let's go ahead and combine these two because that's another of the fun part. And then you can start getting into the hand painting things. So now that we have the plastic and we have the metal. So I'm gonna take the metal and I'm gonna create a mask for that metal. So let's create a black mask. And now obviously that metal or that material is gone or is hidden. And we're gonna go ahead and bring that back. So I'm gonna click on the generator. And this time I'm gonna use something like this metal edge wear, right? So that basically tells the software, look at some of the edges and start creating some wear and tear. So this is a lot of fun. Now, these type of effects can be overdone quite easily just because they look cool and they're easy. But I still think that they're fantastic. But the whole point is that you start with this, and this is your base layer or your base effect, and then you add more on top of it. So I'm gonna adjust this a little bit. I'm gonna add a bit more contrast, play with the wear and tear a bit more so that it's not everywhere. I think this is pretty good. Some areas that don't really make sense to have that much edge wear, we can tweak that. But I think this is working pretty good. We can add more to it. So for example, we can, let's say we can create another generator. This time we can target the curvature, and the curvature is just going to look at the curvature of that mesh map. So pretty intense. So I'm gonna reduce that balance. And I'm also gonna use these curvature settings to adjust that curvature. So I'm only gonna go for something like this. And let's see. So it's very similar, kind of like the placement of it. So let's try a different approach. I'm gonna blur all of this. And what I'm trying to create, because this might seem a little bit random, I have an idea of what I need to create, but the playing of these, like me playing with these sliders, it's kind of trying to achieve that thing that I have in mind. And what I have in mind is a more diffuse version of this map, so that I can create a diffusion of the effect. This is gonna make more sense in just a second. So let me just deal with the effect first, which I think I think this is fine. All right. So this is just the curvature. I'm gonna bring in another effect or another filter, and I'm gonna set this to be warp. And you see the warp is just basically changing things a bit so that it's not as perfect. We can definitely increase things like the source balance. We can change the tiling so that it's not as small. Something very simple. And yeah, that's pretty much it. We can go for a grunge now. Similar to what we did with the dirt. I'm gonna draw maybe, yeah, let's use this grunge cracked dip. This might be a good one. Drop it in there, try planar projection. I'm gonna tile this a little bit, use more contrast and balance. So the reason I'm kind of like showing you this is how I would work. I would have a base layer or base effect for my mask, which is good. But then this becomes very generic, right? So once you have this base, you start adding things to make sure it feels more natural. Because right now, the effect that we have is being driven by the mesh maps. And the mesh maps are being driven by the volumes of the mesh itself or the projection. So you see the wear and tear is exactly the same around everywhere. Like in all the objects or the shape or the volumes that are the same, like these rounded circles, it's the same, which is not conducive to a more realistic asset, just because that's not how the wear and tear will work in real life, right? There's there's areas that would have more and less. It's not like uniform in this sense. So that's why this is a great starting point, but it's always good to customize it. So what I have here is now a curvature that is overriding things currently. then I have the warp to adjust that curvature, and then I have this map. So now I'm going to play around with the combination of the blending modes. So I'm going to add the curvature, and I can go for something like lighten, for example. That is going to, as you can see, light up certain areas. That's not what I need. Maybe a multiplied might be better, but that's going to hide things. So you can just play around with this. If you know exactly what you're going for, you can go for that. So for me, I know something like screen might be better, or even like overlay. That is just going to add more contrast to it. Or you can just hit normal, right? And then once you have that highlighted, you can use the arrows in your keyboard to just go down and see if you can find a good effect that to achieve the thing that you want. So for me, I think the best one would be screen, and I'll show you why in a second. So screen is just going to combine the white colors of both of these effects, and then I'm just going to reduce the opacity. So it's just, as you can see, kind of like a gradient of that sort of blurred curvature into the grunge. And that's kind of like what I want. Then I'm going to have the warp to warp everything. And then I'm going to use this grunge, but this grunge, I'm going to use it to subtract. So I'm going to go for the subtract option here. So you see it is using those sort of like striations or lines to subtract from the entire effect. So I'm going to take that one actually, and I'm going to add a bit more tiling. And I'm going to bring this projection tool to move it around. And finally, just because I know the result would be kind of like faded in certain areas, I'm going to add a levels, but I'm not going to edit this just yet. I'm going to show you the effect first. All right. So this is what we have with our maps. But you see these areas right here. This is kind of like creating the effect that the metal edgeware is very gradual, and then it's kind of like generating a bit of a soft transition between the plastic and the metal, and that again is not very realistic, right? Because that's not how things would wear in a scenario like this. So that's why I have the levels. I'm going to really contrast this entire mask with the white and the dark values, so you can really see what is happening. That's why I created those, right? So you see the wear and tear is pretty harsh in some areas, right? And that's it. So I'm going to show you the before and after. So this is just with the metal edgeware. Again, it's a pretty decent thing, but I want to customize it and make it more my own and have more control of it. So I add the curvature, the warp, the grunge, so that it's not everywhere, and the levels, right? So now we have this that is pretty sharp, and it looks quite good. There's a couple more things. We can add a little bit of height information to differentiate the areas that are plastic or painted plastic or painted metal, and the ones that have metallic. So for doing that, it is a pretty simple thing. I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm just going to enable height information, and I'm going to call this layer HCTRL, as in height control. Right click, make it red. Again, anything that deals with height information, I like to make it red just so that I know visually what to look for. And let's get closer here. And I can use this layer to push things in or out. So this is going to be very subtle. So I'm going to make it minus 0.02. And I think that's still much, but I think that's good. It's just enough so that it can catch some of these sharpness in the light. And if you want to sharpen this effect even more, what I can do is add another filter here in the metal mask, and that's going to be sharpen. So that is going to sharpen that up a bit. Great. So all this work that we've done is in essentially creating two materials, the metal material and the plastic material. And then, sorry, let me just turn this off. So plastic material and a metal material. And the next, let's say the next step, when we have those materials ready, is to work on the mask on how to blend the metal with the plastic. But that is pretty much it. Now, to wrap up today's session, we're just coming up to the time anyway. I'm going to show you how you can deal with the more manual painting for this type of stuff. So you can go into the mask itself. This is a very simple way of doing it. There's a much more complex way of setting this up, and it's a lot of fun as well, which has to do with with anchor points, but we don't have time for that today. So I'm going to show you the simple one that is still very, very effective. I'm going to click on a paint layer. So we're just going to add a paint layer in here. And of course, we can choose a better brush for this. I personally like the inker or the archive inker. That's what I would use with a smaller brush size. And let's go ahead and get closer here. I'll probably have to move this out of the way. But I'm just painting. This is the part that I can just spend a lot of time just working. And this is how you can create this mode of custom cuts and scratches, I suppose. I'm going to show you something else that is really cool in just a second. This is where I spend most of the time, just having fun doing this. And of course, in some areas that maybe doesn't really make sense to have here, it's kind of like hard for anything to sort of like reach and create that wear and tear. So I'm going to invert the mask. And then I'm just going to remove some of these areas. And the cool thing about all this is that really, I am not really changing much, or I'm not affecting the original mask. So if I, at some point, need to add more wear and tear in these areas, all I need to do is turn off my paint layer, or just go ahead and reveal and delete some of what I'm doing right now. See, all of this area could do with less wear and tear. Anyway, so that is the process. I'm just going to show you with the paint layer here, turn on and off, so you can see. So we're not affecting anything that is underneath that paint layer. So that is why this process is so powerful. And that would be it, guys. Oh, I did say that I want to show you something else very quickly. So you could, if you want to add, let's say, some additional scratches, for example, I'm going to do this with another layer just to keep things clean. This is just an extra tip. I can create in the new layer a black mask, a generator. This is going to go for, I'm going to go for the maybe ambient occlusion or the curvature, sorry. And we're going to use the default curvature. And then we're going to use a scratch. So scratches, let's go for these grunge scratches. Let's put that here on top. And let's set it to triplanar. Increase that tiling a little bit more. So basically now we have an image, a black and white image that has a bunch of scratches, and then underneath we have this curvature. So if we use the blending modes, we can position all the scratches along the areas of the curvature, which is kind of like where you would have most of these scratches. So we can set this to multiply, and you'll see all of these scratches right now, they are kind of like towards the areas that have that curvature, that have that edge that is more exposed. But because it is non-destructive, I can go back to the curvature and I can play with the balance and reduce or increase the amount of scratches in those areas, right? So let's say something like this. Let's actually take this, make it a bit rougher, darker color, and make it full metallic. So it's just a quick override of things. And also, because ultimately it is a scratch, so I'm going to enable hide minus 0.01. All right, so very, very subtle stuff, but now we have scratches coming through in a control way. So we have the ability to control things in a couple ways. We can control the placement with the curvature, so we can add the placement or reduce that, or we can also use the grunge map to change the amount of scratches. So very, very subtle, but definitely something worth checking, when worth testing. All right, guys, I think that's it for me today. Hopefully this has given you some ideas of this entire sort of like concepting process. Let me know if there's any final questions. I'm happy to answer anything, about this process. Yep, cool. All right, guys. So that's it for me today. I'm gonna leave it here. And like I said, if you have any questions about this, feel free to contact me or put them in the comments of this live stream. I'll try to get to them at some point. Um, if you are new to Substance Painter, of course, make sure that you check those videos that we have um, in the YouTube channel. And for those that ask about the course, the Painter course, let me just give you a sneak peek really quickly because that course is nearly ready. But we are doing a free workshop that has to do with the whole process that we're gonna deal with. Sorry, deal with in the course, and we are going to texture this together. So this is like a very simple asset, but I'm gonna give you some really cool techniques, a much more structured approach to what I just showed you today. So with this guy right here. So I'm gonna provide the assets and the bakes, everything. So we're just gonna concentrate on techniques to actually texture this and create all of this stuff in a non-destructive way, and that's gonna be a cool workshop that we're setting up for the coming weeks. So keep an eye on that, and if you haven't, go ahead and check the pablander.academy website because that's what's gonna allow you to. Let me just show you. Subscribe to the email list and you'll get all of this stuff into your inbox. So basically, just head over to pablander.academy. I'll just put that in the chat as well. And yeah, just the course is going to be posted here so that you can register your interest very, very soon. But you can just go to the bottom of the homepage or just go to the newsletter. That's where I send all the emails and all these tricks. And then just register your name and address. And I will let you know once the course is ready for the waiting list. We're going to aim to have that waiting list sometime this week or early next week. And as soon as we have that, we can sort of like, let you know when that is going to be ready. And yeah, that is pretty much it. All right, guys. So this has been a pleasure.